You remember last year, what we did right before Halloween was run through a lot of horror movies which had just come out.
Yeah, and
Did
then we
our own little
rated
rating of
we
them.
rated them, yeah.
Indeed, yes. And one of your top ones, if not your top one, was what? Skinamarink?
It was Skinamarink was number 4.
Skinamarink was close to the top for you.
Yeah.
Why was that again?
Because I thought that it was different from a lot of the films that we were
It
watching.
was quite surreal, and there was a belief or theory out there that it took place in a child's mind who was in a coma. Right?
Also, yeah, but the story was very experimental.
Fantasmas is similar, where it all takes place in the mind of Julio, who could be in a coma, for all we know. He lives in a world where apparently as a child he was he got stuck somewhere or hit on the head, or they describe it in the show, but he's stuck with an overactive imagination where he sees everything in a different filter and he lives his life in a different way.
Well, he's playing a fictionalized version of himself.
Yeah, that's
Julio
weird.
Torres is Julio Torres.
Of course.
I got when I was watching it kind of everything everywhere all at once, mixed with Children's Hospital, corporate, and really any Adult Swim series, but it wasn't on Adult Swim, it was on HBO.
Yeah, so I've already compared it to Skinamarink. Close enough. So what the series does, unlike Los Espookys would have several different. It had an ensemble cast, and the episodes would follow independent storylines between all the characters. This, it kind of does its own skits, and so like it'll, even though it's still part of his head, it will go do sketch comedy almost in different portions. That's where we got the Melf storyline, the Q storyline, the Sad Dick storyline. Kind of like if JD took LSD and Scrubs, and he had those like moments where he would just pan out into a different world. That's what we get here, and that reminded me of Close Enough. If you remember in the first episodes of that, there was a plot line where the wife gets stuck in a sitcom-ish reality.
I think that was the second episode.
Yes, and Melf is kind of that same thing. We've seen satire of the Alf series or sitcoms in general.
Yes.
Ryan, whatever, takes over the world, or the YouTube series.
Mr. Robot also made fun of Alf.
Of course. But the Melf one I found really funny. You had Paul Dano in it. You had the girl from No Activity who has also shown up in Ultra City Smiths.
And Everything Everywhere All at Once.
And Everything Everywhere All at Once. And then the Q storyline with the Steve Buscemi cameo, where it's just the letters of the alphabet, kind of like in a Sesame Street way, where he feels like, I think it started with Julio saying that Q should be later on in the alphabet, and then them showing Steve Buscemi as Q, kind of just being this rogue version of all the letters, and who wants to hang out with the cool kids, but then realizes that he might be better off just hanging out with O. It's a stupid storyline. I didn't like it. Sad Dick, though, was the weirdest one because it took place where this teacher went into the boys' bathroom and saw all the dicks that were on the stalls.
I told you at the time it reminded me of Superbad.
Yeah.
Because Jonah Hill's character has that same thing where he's like obsessed with drawing dicks. And also American Vandal.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that. I must have missed like going to the bathroom in high school, like at the school. I guess I just held it because I don't ever remember going into a stall in high school bathrooms and seeing any graffiti whatsoever.
Yeah, that didn't usually happen.
It feels like...
But it always does in TV shows.
Yeah, kind of like with lockers. Lockers are in every high school TV show except in real life, where they've been kind of taken out for the most part. So yeah, Julio also has his own storyline outside of the Sad Dick, Q, and Melf storyline, where he's having this ongoing dream.
Right, yeah, where he's stuck in a room.
Yeah, where he's kind of stuck in life, and he wants to leave the room, but his cap is too big, and then he opens a door to another world, and it's kind of like Dark Matter, where that other world is a different universe, and it's very snowy, but he can't walk out of it.
Well, what the show was trying to do was it was trying to have an overarching story, but really it was a way for Julio Torres and his team to make a sketch comedy TV series, because he wrote for SNL. He wrote for SNL for 7 years.
Wow.
And he missed the format of it so much, especially like whenever they would film the digital shorts. And then Dave McCary, who's married to Emma Stone, but also he was someone who directed a lot of SNL shorts, they got on board. So Emma Stone and Dave McCary now executively produced this. And then it was just a way for him to, go back to that format and kind of make anything. Almost like I Think You Should Leave, but with, I guess, a little more heart.
It's more heart, but it's also less funny. This is a surreal comedy in that, like, not every joke works. If you look at, like, the Pentaveret, which came out, the Mike Myers series, I think Keegan-Michael Key was also in it.
That was a long
It's
time ago,
hit
yeah.
or miss. That was on Netflix, I think. Smiling Friends, I enjoy that show. Danger Five, I also enjoy, but they're so niche audiences that I feel like finding a base for this. It's kind of similar to his previous show, Los Espookys, right?
Yep.
Which also had Fred Armisen. Yeah, it also reminds me of Too Many Cooks. You know,
Too Many Cooks? That again premiered on Adult Swim. That's why I was saying it feels like
but
an Adult
even
Swim
Melf,
series.
did not Melf feel like the fox from that or whatever that thing?
Smurf or whatever. Yeah, it was like Smurf or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's just a satire of those comedy or the sitcoms. So in a way, I can see how it would be connected to SNL because it feels like rejected sketches that made their way on. I don't think Q would ever have made its premiere on SNL, even in the later part of the episodes. But Phantasmas as a whole, it kind of left me in a weird mood. Like I finished that, and then I finished the end of Baby Reindeer. Both very like weird shows, and I thought my dreams were going to be all messed up. They're so absurd. I went back and listened to our Los Espookys podcast,
Right.
and a lot of the same criticisms and pros I have the same for this. You know,
So what are they?
well, back then it was that it was absurd. It felt like Scooby Doo without the van because you had more of an ensemble, and that ragtag group of friends would work hauntings, if you remember. The plot was nonsense. Andres was one of my favorite characters in that, and that was Julio.
Mhm.
They are virtually the same person. I know you said that he's playing a extravagant version of himself in this, right?
Yeah.
Or a crazy version
A
of himself.
fictionalized version, yeah.
Yeah, but like in an exaggerated form of it. In the other show, in that episode, he has a water demon in him, and he at one point has to contact the moon directly. This has nothing to do with the water demon, but he just talks to the moon directly for advice about getting his earring back so it can help him find it. And then he finds it. And then in this episode, in the pilot of Fantasmas, what does he do halfway through? He gets out of the cab and he goes and finds this earring. So I feel like these two characters, you could tell me that this was a spin-off directly from Los Espookys and that this guy did fall into a coma in that show, and this is what he's been imagining the entire time.
The earring story happened to him in real life.
So he's just decided to repeat it in different versions.
What he said was he got a ton of money. He bought a diamond earring, and then like I think 2 days later he misplaced it.
Season 2, episode 1 is the one we did of Los Espookys. You can go back to that episode and you can see the earring plot line just repeated in a different way. It's just him collecting an earring.
So you didn't find this to be too different?
The similarities are the same cons. It looks cheap. In fact, part of me thinks that HBO sees the success of things like Everything Everywhere All at Once or Smiling Friends or the Pentaveret, which I don't even think was that successful. But it realizes that it can make a lot of that for a little bit of money. And for instance, even the sets, because clearly they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to make anything accurate. In fact, that's sort of the gist of the entire like frame of reference. Like, you know what I'm saying?
It
right?
feels like he's stuck in a dream sequence a lot of the time.
But all the mistakes in the sets are treated as if they're intentional. You know?
Yes, well, and I think that when it comes to the lighting, there's an obvious contrast between
like
the
only
light
thing
and
they
dark.
seem to spend money on in this series is makeup. They probably had the highest makeup budget versus any show that we've seen thus far because everybody's wearing it. The guys, the girls, the freaking what's it called? The Melf, the puppet. And it is weird seeing Idea Man, the Jim Henson series, and thinking about how he's all about creativity.
Especially since
nothing more creative than something like this, where it's like anything can have meaning. Not necessarily does it need meaning, but you can make anything have meaning.
I mean, that's at least that seems like interesting, though. It seems like it's trying to, like you were saying, give a story to something.
It also achieves a lot in those 29 minutes. You don't usually see as like 4 different plots. I'm not going to call them fleshed out plots, but they're certainly there. And the guest stars are cool to see. So there are reasons to like it, but overall it kind of just stood in the middle for me. And I think I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10.
A 5 out of 10, so it doesn't pass. I think that it was made for people that just like Julio Torres. And I mean, he's done a lot. In fact, I even have a game here, 3 truths, 1 lie. And I wanted to see if you could guess what the lie was.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, as I stated, he wrote for SNL. And he's the first one. He's responsible for the Ryan Gosling Papyrus sketch. He wrote that. That's the first one.
The first Papyrus Ship. I know this is probably true because I saw some headline where it said Avatar associated with him, and so I think that would probably be true. Yeah.
The second one is Julio Torres originally pitched this series back in 2018. The third one is back.
This series, I know that
Yeah.
the second season of Los Espookys, it took them. Yeah, they finished writing it in 2019, and then it took them several years before they were able to make it. So it would be interesting if he already had this in the bag.
The third one is back in college, he was a tour guide and gave an exclusive tour to Sofia Vergara. And the fourth
Just because
one
of the Spanish connection? Okay.
And the fourth one is the original title for this show was called Little Films. So that is the Papyrus sketch that it was pitched back in 2018.
Okay, I'm going to go with the most boring one, which is the titles are little films.
No, that was actually true. The one that was a lie was that it was pitched back in 2018. The Sofia Vergara one, it was only because he was the only Spanish speaker, so he gave a tour guide exclusively to her. This was actually...
Which you've been watching Griselda, and she's been doing still good in that? Like,
yeah,
up to
but this series was pitched back in 2020, right after Los Espookys Season 2 ended, and then Los Espookys got canceled. People were mad about it, but they were really happy that Julio Torres, especially because he came out with a film earlier this year in March that was also executively produced by Emma Stone and Dave McCary called Problemista. In fact, that's even what one of the reviews was talking about, because it's gotten good reviews, but they said that it came out too closely to Problemista for you to really get a good sense of differentiating between the two of them.
I'm surprised. I couldn't really think of... I know that I'm comparing it to other stuff, but it's its own distinct thing. The only one that's really overlapping is Los Espookys because his character seems so similar to it. It also feels like he plays more juvenile than he is. I know he's in his like late 30s, and it feels like his characters are kind of stuck in this mindset of like he doesn't have a job. He's not really... He thinks of himself in a... I guess he lives in a water tank. Is that what they said in this?
But he also...
What do you think actually, I have a question for you. So what do you think the weirdest moment of this episode was? It when Dano was making out with Melf, or do you think it was when they were analyzing dicks on the stalls?
Probably when...
Or when they changed the dick into a person. You know, at the very end where she's looking at her husband and it suddenly turned into a dick.
They're all...
like, yeah.
I mean, Paul Dano making out with Melf was weird, but I think that's only because it was Paul Dano. There's also just weird things like Bebo. We haven't even talked about him. He's a robot in the series. He reminded me a lot of Other Space, that robot.
Oh, I mean, Bebo is a placeholder for any robot, but I feel like we've specifically seen him before in the Black Mirror, like, spin-off series, Love, Death, and Robots. Like, I think he is one of the main 3 robots.
Well, Bebo actually makes a cameo appearance in Problemista as well.
Oh, okay.
So I guess they're supposed to take place in the same world.
That's cool. And then also Blind Spot was another one that I compared it to. The movie, if you remember, there's a weird cab driver who like picks them up and has guns in
the Uber driver.
Yeah, and half of this episode was all about a weird Uber driver who was like way too friendly.
Well, talking about characters, what did you think of Venestra? that was his boss.
Okay,
almost.
So that was an interesting backstory, was the fact that he had hired her to be just an actress who followed him around and pretend to be his agent, but she'd been working on the job so long that she sort of just does agent things. I did find that funny.
That's actually kind of what happened in real life. She was on Los Espookys for 7 episodes, but she had a non-speaking role. But then when he started talking to her, he realized how interesting she was. She was a photographer and a performance artist, and then he was like, "Oh, I absolutely need you to get on the show," and then hired her to play that role.
That's the big dream. What do you think of the title, Cookies and Spaghetti? Again, a Melf ripoff because
I think the Melf was the best episode. The Melf sketch, that was probably my favorite part.
But it was also the most logical, so I would say probably the least authentic to this show.
You think the show is just not supposed to make any sense at all?
I think that going forward, you shouldn't expect more Melf.
Well, yes, I thought you were going to say going forward, you shouldn't expect it to really close off, and that's true. Season 1, I've read, doesn't actually end on any type of satisfying note. I think they have a cliffhanger, and they're setting up for Season 2 right now. But it has a 6.5 on IMDb, a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score is a 62%, and it's gotten pretty good reviews. AV Club gave it an A, the pilot, and called it a triumph. Variety said Torres has successfully forged a platform for his uncompromised, unfiltered voice. So So once again, I think that this is a series that was really just made for Julio Torres. It's funny you mentioned Too Many Cooks earlier, because the series was actually visually inspired by Lars von Trier, who in Too Many Cooks, Lars von Trier plays the pie. If you remember that.
Okay.
So
who played the evil guy in that? Who was the guy who stood behind him? Because I think we've seen him in other things as well. I just forgot what it was.
yeah, but he's not in this.
Okay. Fred Armisen not going to make an appearance?
No, but there are going to be other SNL people that show up.
Andy Samberg?
No.
Oh. I'm thinking of the Portlandia cast, honestly, because Portlandia was, in a weird, absurdist way, sort of sketch comedy as well. What did you think of the first sketch, which had Julio go into Crayola? I liked how they had everybody at Crayola, like, in their desks working with one color. I thought that was funny. But he was pitching the idea of them making a clear Crayola marker or crayon. And I feel like as a kid, I remember there already being
there was
clear.
some.
So I didn't understand it. I was kind of frustrated even because I was like, you're pitching something A, that is a waste of time, which is the joke, but also B, I think it already exists. And if it doesn't, what did I use during? Was it just a white crayon that I used during Easter?
No, I remember there was like a gray invisible one, if I'm remembering correctly,
and
that
so
people used.
Maybe they just didn't have it where he was where he was at the time. Or maybe they didn't have it in New York because that's where this is supposed to be based.
Well, it's actually where they shot it as well in New York.
So it didn't make much sense, and then they went from there. But
I mean, this is Julio Torres' baby. He executively produced, wrote, directed, and starred in all the episodes. But you would have thought
someone on the board would have been like, "Hey, can't we just scrap this first one because they actually have made this clear one before? So what are we actually making fun of them for, or what are we trying to say?" Like, I did like the toast thing in Melf, where like the daughter came back at the end and she was going by Toast. So there's do's and don'ts, and people who like these other type of shows are probably going to find something to like in this one.
So you're not going to watch this other 6 episodes?
Absolutely not. I've got Smiling Friends to watch the rest of. How about you? Are you going to watch any more?
Probably, yeah, because it's gotten good reviews, and I think that I'm more a fan of that humor, I think, than you are.
Maybe. We'll leave it with you telling me why they called it Fantasmas, because he did address that sort of in the show. It was supposed to be Phantasma, and then he added
and then they added the S.
But like, is it supposed to be a Fantasia thing, or like, is that just a Spanish word for?
I think it's just a Spanish. Well, they say in the show it's a Spanish word for ghost, Fantasma, and then
for
the
ghost.
S. Yes, for ghosts.
So it is like a Los Espookys, and you're saying wow, okay. You're saying this isn't a spinoff.
No, he said it in the show though. He said,
I know, I must have missed that line because there's a lot of plot there.
He brought a lot of people from Los Espookys over to this.
So what is the difference? It feels like he tricked HBO into just greenlighting him another season where he's more of a main character.
Well, it's not like they have any of the other characters showing up.
He even got his earring back. And now he's just calling himself that. This one gets canceled. The next thing you know, they're just going to be calling it like he's going to do a Curb. It'll be Curb Your Enthusiasm. They have to replace Larry David somehow, and it's just going to be Julio Torres.
I felt like it was an A24 production. I think that's kind of, and you're not the biggest fan of A24.
Oh, I hate A24. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a little bit too much for me. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.